Coogs House. All right, we got our first look at Houston's first real tough opponent in basketball. And I don't know, guys, I think they look pretty good.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougars Daily Podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater that came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen today. Appreciate you making us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Cougars. Want to join the conversation, but don't say, tell us in the comments down below. Okay, think about this before you answer. Is coffee kind of just bean broth? Think about it. Let me know. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. More on that later, but America's #1 sportsbook has got some great deals for you over there at FanDuel. All right, I want to talk about some recruit news with potential big-time recruit coming in. Again, potential, but I got good insight there. I want to talk about this year's basketball team after some pondering, after a couple days removed from seeing them on the hardwood going into the weekend. But first and foremost, I want to talk some about Houston's first really tough opponent in Auburn, after Auburn just knocked off Vermont team by about 50 points. Auburn enters the season number 11 team in the country, and frankly, obviously these preseason games, you expect the major program to knock off the mid-major program. To Auburn's credit, several SEC members in their conference did not do that. However, Vermont's perennially an NCAA tournament team. They won that conference like 7 or 8 years in a row, the American East Conference. And Auburn was up by 50 for a majority of the second half. Auburn's very talented. I want to kind of talk through what I saw on them. Tomorrow we're going to talk to Zach Blackerby of Locked On Auburn. We also make a second episode out of my little scout with a little bit more detailed notes on this. But just watch the game one time through live. And honestly, with no football game this week, I'm kind of getting into this in a way that, so many days between games, got some days off to think about what Houston's going to do and how Houston's going to match up. This is the same program and same head coach and Bruce Pearl and stuff like that Houston matched up with in the second round of the NCAA tournament a couple years ago in Birmingham. This weekend, Houston gets them in Houston at the Toyota Center as part of a little showcase deal that you got Rice playing as well in the other game and yada, right? Auburn enters the season number 2 in KenPom, number 11 in the AP poll, and frankly did some things that were really, really impressive. Obviously, Janai Broome is one of the few returning guys that was on that team 2 years ago that Houston played in the NCAA tournament. For what it's worth, there was hype coming into the season about Janai Broome being a NCAA National Player of the Year kind of guy if Auburn's year shook out right, and he looked the part on Wednesday night. I don't mean to make things bigger than they are, but at 6'10", he's expanded his game out to the 3-point line a little bit. He looks like a pro-bound 4 or power forward kind of guy maybe now. He's played a lot more minutes for them and for Morehead State before them as a true center. So we'll see kind of how that game adjusts and adapts. And frankly, I still trust Jawan Roberts over him. I don't mean to say like I'm going too far gone with this, but it's a real big test for Houston. He's, the fifth-year guy, being for that position, National Player of the Year, et cetera, right? This roster has a lot of new guys on it that weren't there 2 years ago. A lot of the roster wasn't there last year between transfers and freshmen. And it's got enough talent in the guard portion, the guard room, that Tahad Pettiford, I'd say he's more like 5'10", 5'11". He's listed at 6'1". He was a 5-star McDonald's All-American guard at Auburn. He's now at Auburn as a freshman. He doesn't start for this team. They're really, really deep in the backcourt. And quick notes here offensively. because Broom has stretched his game out, they run a lot of 5-out with backside actions, and the play side sits in spots. And what I mean by that is, if I'm driving from the right wing, my right side of the court is sitting still, while my backside, the left side of the court, is doing some sort of a screen action or down screen or cuts or whatever. That's where the things are happening, right? I think part of this is because you can get away with the 5-out with Janai Broom expanding his game out so far. I also think that it's interesting that they occasionally, based on a call word or a signal or something, which like spontaneously flip into like a flex cut and stuff like that, right? So it kind of gives up a lot of options. The biggest thing with their offense, though, look to me against Vermont, is that this team is determined to shoot the three. Just that first watch through, Auburn shot 35 threes and just 11 free throws. Honestly, I thought those numbers were even more distant from one another watching it live. 35 threes is a lot for a college game. 11 free throws is not very many. What that's indicating is a lot of movement and shooting of threes, not a whole lot of getting to the basket and getting free throws and attacking the rim, right? As far as shooting standouts go, Miles Kelly, who is also a transfer, shot 7 and 9 from 3 in the Vermont game. Now, it looked very routine for him. He got excited once he started getting hot, right? But it looked routine for him. They didn't look like crazy shots or like, oh, this is a Vermont team who can't cover anything like that. It was very much a solid 7 and 9. He shot 32% from 3 last year. I talked to Zach a little bit, or setting up the Locked On crossover. It sounds like this may be more of his role, and so you might see more of that. For what it's worth, 4 of the 5 starters hit multiple threes, and Miles Kelly does not start. And so, again, this is a team that really, really relies on the three-point jump shots. Those 4 starters were 9 of 17. Chad Baker-Mazara, another new guy to Auburn. Of his 8 field goals he attempted, 7 of them were threes, right? And he's a 6'7" guy. This is a team that really, really lives on that perimeter. And we'll talk to Zach some tomorrow's show about like what he thinks about that as a strategy. Live by the 3, die by the 3. I don't know. Defensively, they get after it. The same Miles Kelly guy that's a great shooter is I put down here in my notes app while I was watching. He's a mop because he's always on the floor. He's just always on the ground. And I mean that in the best way possible. If somehow that got back to like, I'm impressed by it. He's always diving around, loose balls, taking charges, those kind of things. The kid Pettiford, the backup point guard, I think he's going to have to start for them at some point this year. They have a lot of talent. I don't mean to say that they don't. And I get that. I heard her pronounce on the TV telecast Peags, JP Peags, the transfer in at guard. He obviously deserves some minutes as well, but Dahad Pettiford's a really tenacious defender, really, really good on the ball defender. I imagine you see Peags and Pettiford, split the game up in this game. Auburn did not play anyone more than 22 minutes. In fact, only one guy went over 20 minutes. That was Janai Broom. But most guys, they had like 11 guys over 10 minutes. So like that kind of dispersion in a game against Vermont, who again is, for all intents and purposes, going to be a tournament team, is impressive. I'd say that I think Pettiford and Peags probably split the game at point guard. I think Pettiford's the better defender. I think against Houston, though, JP Peags is probably going to have the better game offensively just because he is that veteran. He is a senior. I think he's a 5th-year senior if I'm looking at these stats right. And I say it to say that I think that, when you think of Houston's defensive intensity and, I imagine he gets the Milos Uzan matchup. I think that that's going to be kind of where those things go. And so Houston's got kind of the opposite. Both these teams are very, very veteran, but Houston returns most of its lineup from last year. Obviously, you lose Jamal Shedd, but you return 4 starters. You get Tugler healthy. You get Arsenal healthy. I assume Francis will play this weekend. It sounds like he mostly was held out on Monday as a very big precautionary thing. They didn't feel like they needed him. I think that's a very solid returning group. Obviously, you won the Big 12 last year in the regular season with that group. Auburn has probably, I don't have it quite pulled up in a direct comparison, but like the same amount of college years on their resume, right? They have the same amount of 5-year guys, 6-year guys, etc. A couple freshmen. Houston's got a couple freshmen. The big difference for Auburn is their guys are new to Auburn and new to Pearl and new to whatever. And so I think it's going to be important. And we'll talk to Zach some to clarify what he thinks about this. After watch him much more close in person. He's a local guy that's there all the time. I would imagine the comfort in the system, having played for Houston, played for Sampson, et cetera, is going to be a big factor in this. Whereas like Pearl's guys aren't used to that system yet, right? So this game might play out a lot differently in March than it does in November. That said, I'm glad we get to play them in November. Both these teams kind of have similar non-conference slates, and like they play Duke, they play Purdue, Houston will play Alabama, and they'll have a couple of these games in the non-conference part that will like look like big games. Honestly, if I'm being frank, Auburn probably has more of them on their schedule, and so that's going to be a lot of tests along the way here. That is all to say that beating Auburn in early November, as they get better over the course of the year, is the kind of win that could look really, really good on your resume come February, March, right? And hopefully into April. And so it's a big, big weekend for Houston Cougar basketball. We'll be previewing a lot of the next couple of days, but I want to get in some tidbits and early notes after watching them go live, because that was an impressive basketball game, I thought, from Auburn. I'm sure Zach's broken it down over at Locked On Auburn already, but man, that was an impressive day. Now I want to talk some about Houston basketball, because this is Locked On Cougs after all. Before we get to that, I told you guys today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports, because right now you can get on the NFL action by betting just $5, just $5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and getting back $150 in bonus bets if that bet hits. Well, you know a lot about football. I can see you guys in the comments telling me all the stuff you know about football. Put down $5, hit, win. It's that easy. Go to FanDuel.com right now to join today. If you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you see the latest stats, if you do the play-by-play, you can do that at FanDuel as well. So get started with $150 back in bonus bets by winning that first $5 bet at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Parker Ainsworth, Locked On Cougs here, breaking down Houston basketball. It's a big basketball week with football and a bye week and basketball season starting. And I really, in like thinking about this throughout the week here and looking at what kind of a journey we're about to take this Houston Cougar basketball program, because we're setting that up this week, right? We're setting up what Houston basketball is going to look like this year and what this team's going to look like this year. I wonder if, when you look at a 1 through 11 man roster, really 1 through 12 man roster, we just haven't seen Francis play it this year, if this is not the best team Sampson has had at Houston. And I know it's early. I know it's, a lot to prove. I know he's had incredible, a literal Final Four run a couple years ago, right? Incredible rosters here. He said probably more talented rosters in the Final Four roster that have suffered injuries and not gotten as far because of those injuries, right? I maintain that last year's team, and I know you do too, I can see you nodding along, but Jamal Shea doesn't get hurt against Duke. There's no reason Houston doesn't win the whole thing. It's just that simple. He was that valuable, right, last year. It's also just that simple. Now, and Marcus Sasser, the groin the year before, Jamal Shea's own knees were kind of wearing down that year too. There was lots going on. He had Jarris in the back and different stuff. I mean, there was a lot happening in that 2023 team. This team legitimately enters the season. Obviously, Francis, I guess, missed the first game, so kind of enters the season with 12 dudes that all feel like they play Big 12 basketball right away. Now, admittedly, Mercy Miller is more of an offensive player, and Cordell Jefferson is probably more of a defensive player, and Ced Lott is more of a bruiser, and whatever, right? But like Terrence Arsenault played just 17 minutes in your opener. He's coming off the bench, coming off an Achilles tear. I'm telling you right now, draft stock. That guy's getting drafted to the NBA, if not this summer, next. It won't. I mean, he just moves like an NBA player. he shoots like an NBA player. He defends like a good NBA defender. He's just already there, right? Now, where he fits on this roster is as a winner. He's doing whatever Sampson wants. He's coming off the bench, and that helps the team. But Arsenal's playing like a pro. In front of him, you got Manuel Sharp, who is a leader, was a high point guy in a lot of games last year, won you a lot of games. We don't shoot the ball. He's in the best shape of the time he's been at Houston by like leaps and bounds. I mentioned the other night, but like he put his foot in the ground and just got downhill against, admittedly, a meh Jackson State team, but it was a gear he's never hit at Houston before, just from a speed perspective. And, that adds a whole other element to a game for a guy that was already a prolific scorer and a solid defender and so many things for this program. LJ Cryer has been first team All Big 12 already, and he's coming in as a best shooter in the conference. Jalen Roberts was the best power forward in the Big 12 conference last year, and he's back. Or like this just feels like a lot of things adding up. They're positionless guys. Like I don't really know what you call Malik Wilson. I don't really know what you call Ramon Walker. I don't know which forward spot you want to call JoJo Tugler. And if he's hitting threes now like he did without hesitation, do you call him a small forward? Like all these guys have these, and I don't know if JoJo Tugler is actually shooting threes quite like that, right? But all these guys have this very positionless flow to them, and there's kind of makes Houston a really malleable team, right? Where they can go like Tugler, Arsenault, Ramon, Malik, I don't know, Cryer. And like suddenly it's like, okay, I don't really know who plays what position, but I don't want to have to guard any of them. And I don't want any of those guys guarding me, right? like that's very quickly what you got here, right? You could go huge. You could have like a Uzan who's 6'4" ish. You could have Arsenault. You could have Sharp. You could have Tugler. You could have Francis. You could have Roberts. That's six deep of guys, and that you could have like outmatch in size the guy across them at all spots and just bully ball people, right? I look at this roster up and down and think, oh my Lord, it looks like it could all come together. Admittedly, part of that and part of my realization, part of my thought of that in the last couple of days is because of how well Milos fits into this whole thing, right? Now, Milos came in and against a team that he didn't need to play a whole lot against. He did lead Houston in minutes at 26, right? And we talked last year about how like depth at point guard is a valuable thing. Milos shot 2 of 4 from 3. And, one of them was very open, but I thought what he did more impressively was get downhill, find open guys, dish the ball out. He had 10 assists in the opening game, and frankly, had he played more like 32, 33 minutes, he might have had a triple-double. He had 10 assists. He also had 8 points and 7 rebounds and a 6'4" long arms. He's going to get some rebounds. 4 steals, I think, is still to this moment of this recording is the most anyone's had, tied for the most anyone's had in a game yet this season. Just impressive athlete. The way he fits into this so easily, well, he does different things than Jamal Shead did a year ago, is admittedly better than I anticipated because I thought this was going to take some more time to weave him into the fray. Obviously, I guess it stands to reason that could change, but right now it looks like he fits in pretty well. And second, it opens up other guys. There were moments last year, and admittedly, it's because he was just better than everyone else, but where you just needed Jamal Shead to get you 30, and so we went out and did it. I think Milos can get you a bunch of points if you need him to. He can shoot, he can dribble, he's long, he gets the lane, he's got a big body. But truthfully, I feel like if he's like, hey, we got to get some points here. Hey, LJ, I got you. Hey, Emmanuel, I got you. Hey, J1, meet me at the rim, right? Like those things are what's going to happen in this one. I like the way his skill set pairs up, though, with the drive and dish and be able to see over guys once it gets in the lane to make great skips and those kinds of things, especially in this matchup with Auburn this weekend, because Vermont had a lot of drive and kick threes, a lot of open drive and kick threes, and they only shot 21% from behind the arc. Houston's going to shoot better than that. I can tell you that right now. Houston shot 60% from behind the arc against Jackson State. And while that's maybe a bad team to use a reference, they're not very good this year, we'll see where they finish out and whatever. I will say that Houston has a lot of shooters. And if they're going to let Houston drive and kick, it might not be 60%, but it's going to be pretty darn high. And Houston, and that they can score in bunches like that because the defense will wear you out, cause a couple turnovers, get a couple fast breaks that way. It can explode in a hurry. Now Auburn's good, and I don't want to act like and overlook them or whatever. But we saw this team play teams ranked in the top 15 throughout the year last year. And while it maybe was closer than you want here and there, right? We remember beating Texas in Austin or whatever, right? Or, the Iowa State game that Houston won was in Houston. We also know that they got through all of that, right? Like they got through it and were fine. They had an incredible opening half against Baylor in Waco last year, and ultimately it got to overtime because of some comeback and late game heroics from Jamal. But ultimately, we've seen this team and a lot of these exact same names and guys weather that storm of playing a top caliber team to start in the early part of the year. And so we'll see how Saturday goes. We'll talk to Zach about it over at Locked on Auburn. We'll preview it a little more in depth. I want to get in the analytics on this one and kind of see where on the floor the shots were most consistent from and see if that tracks with kind of what my eye test was and things like that. So lots to talk about with Houston playing Auburn this weekend and things like that. But on the whole, I really think that this looks like one of the best rosters they've ever had. And I know that this program has been to the most Final Fours in the state of Texas. I understand that Texas is a great basketball state. It gets under discussed because of the football and all that. I'm telling you, healthy, the right breaks, this team does the whole thing. And it's really like it just has to continue to grow, continue to fit. Potential just means you ain't done it yet. I don't mean to but like going through bit by bit what this team does well to get ready for this week. I'm like, holy crap. This list of things they do well is really long. Really, really long. Now, I mentioned that we have some recruit news to kind of talk through. Nothing's official yet, nothing's going on yet, but Houston's in a really good spot with a really good player. And I'll get that in a second. But before we get to that, I mentioned that I'm a teacher, I'm a coach, I'm also a dad, for what that's worth. that's probably the biggest job of all of them, right? Certainly the one that's the most fun most days. But all those things require a lot of energy, especially a 17-month-old. And our friends over at 5 Hour Energy know that being a passionate football fan also requires a lot of energy. It's a way of life. It takes a lot of energy to power through all those tailgates and touchdown celebrations and sometimes those agonizing defeats. We're getting over those, though. We're getting over those. And they've created Stay in the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot with a special flavor called Fan Fuel. Energy shot made just for super fans that need that little boost. The fans who are the first in the parking lot and the last to leave, they see us. So you can get the energy to get that big 41-yard touchdown like Zion Chris has, or you can get that big putback dunk like Jamal had against A&M last year, or whatever you need the extra boost of energy for. 5 Energy has got you. 5 Energy knows that no matter what team you're rooting for, but we hope it's the Cougs, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy. And whether you're prepping for the big tailgate or ironing your jersey, your game day to-do list is always a mile long. That's why the limited edition Stay in the Fan 5 Energy Shot is here to keep you fueled throughout the season. What's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with a 5 Hour Energy, 5hourenergy.com, shipped nationwide. Parker Andrew, Locked on Coogs here. I want to talk a little bit about a recruit named Koa. Koa Peat is a 6'8"-ish, 220, 225 pound-ish forward from Arizona, specifically Gilbert, Arizona. I'm not familiar with the state very well, but Gilbert, Arizona goes to Perry High School. And he is a big-time 5-star plus, meaning he is at least a 5-star. Some people have him as the higher rank, whatever, across all recruiting websites and outlets. He is a true pro. Think, Jarris Walker-like. He's maybe a little bit thinner. Jarris was super strong and bulked out, but probably actually has more wiggle to his handle. Both shoot the ball very well for guys their size. I think the thing that sets them apart to me, though, is they're both tenacious defenders. Across the board, though, Koa, being from Arizona, has been high on Arizona State to this point in his recruiting. And, Houston was a great fit for him for a lot of reasons. But for some family things, he wanted to stay home and wanted to be able to play at home and have his family there all the time and whatever. And I think that it's something you can't really argue against when a kid says that, right? I do think, though, that what's interesting is this week On3 has put out a list. Once he announced his top 5, Houston was in it, and I think that surprised some people that Houston was still in the running here. A lot of people had other schools, like if he's going to leave the state of Arizona, he's going to go to a blue blood, a Carolina or whatever, right? And Houston managed to stay in the top 5. It's actually 3 of his top 5 were in the state of Texas: Baylor, Houston, and the University of Texas. And a lot of people look at this like, well, what would that be about? Well, as far as playing close to home goes, the Big 12 schools will be playing in the state of Arizona, will be playing in nearby Utah and Colorado and stuff like that. Easier trips for the family. So I think Big 12 schools have an advantage here for sure. The other part of this I'll say is that Houston was very high on Koa, and it kind of felt like at one point he was going to do the going home thing, and so people stopped connecting the two. I think Houston had a great relationship with the kid beforehand. I think he's such a natural fit in the program, both on the floor and off of it, that it was going to work out. Again, this is a kid that's one of the top athletes in the country and loves getting coached hard, loves playing defense, and is a surefire pro kind of athlete as long as all things break his way, right? Now, the big news, though, in the drop of his top 5 schools on 3 was that it sounds like University of Arizona is fading fast. As a power forward sized guy with skills that translate to a small forward or a wing, Koa is a unique athlete, right? Arizona, it sounds like, doesn't want to budge much on how they're going to play him as a power forward. It's going to be more of a post power forward, an old school kind of basketball, whatever. And that's just kind of what they're going to do. And it doesn't sound like that's, meshing up very well with how Koa sees his game developing. And further, if he were going to play in the NBA as soon as possible, where his game would need to be getting to, right? Arizona State, it sounds like part of the deal is their basketball program is not up to snuff in the same way some of these other ones are, but it is close to home, right? And so does he want to go be the one-man show or something like that for a hot second, akin to Michael Beasley, Kansas State, however many years ago that was, or whatever, right? Like something like that along those lines. This is where Houston gets back in the fray, right? Houston has the great relationship with him from before. Houston's a very natural fit. Houston, we know, is getting a decent amount of money in their basketball NIL programs, which are doing really well, thanks to guys like Landon Gosling and Lincoln Coogs and so on. It's very self-driven basketball program. The basketball programs NIL thing is too, and so those guys deserve all the credit for the things they're doing. Koa is looking at schools like Houston because of what they did with guys like Jarris, right? Because Sampson's offense, while it isn't that different year to year, he's got that NBA experience, right? He's got that NBA pedigree. He coached on the Rockets. He coached on the Bucks. He coached on the Spurs, right? He's done that thing before, and he understands that in those games, a guy that's 6'8", 225 has to be able to handle the ball, has to be able to play on the perimeter, has to be able to shoot, and uses them as such. Remember, Jarris Walker, while he wasn't necessarily the ball handler that Koa was, he shot the ball very well from behind the arc, right? He got those shots up. He got those attempts. He was a top 10 pick. Koa's work, his body of work, translates to a very similar way. And this is when we had Jarris a couple years ago, and I was like, this guy is a program changer. This is how the program changes. Guys see that. Guys can emulate that. Guys can be that. And ultimately, it sounds like that's doing a great number on Koa potentially being a Coug. Seems like things are trending more that way than they were before. He's not making a commitment necessarily this week. It sounds like that may happen soon, but not like in the next 24 hours soon. Of course, now I said that, knock on wood, something is going to happen. But it sounds like Houston's getting better and better ranked in his list, so to speak, simply by some schools moving down and Houston being the great option, right? And I understand that Isaiah Harwell is committed. I understand Bryce Jackson's committed. Bryce Jackson's a steal. You heard it here first. I don't know if you heard it for her first, but you heard it here now, right? Houston feels really good about a couple other 4-star, 5-star kind of guys. I know like Kingston Fleming, Chris Sinek. These guys are big-time prospects. This guy is in the same ballpark, if not higher. This guy is a pro in the summer of 2026. This guy is another program-changing caliber 5-star guy. And Houston's maintained a relationship. Houston stayed close. Houston continues to shake the right hands. He continues to be just a great fit with Houston, which is why they're doing that. I'm not saying it's set in stone. I've got no intel saying that is set in stone, but it does sound like things are trending in the right direction. And we're talking about playing Auburn this weekend, and this season's going to be a great season. That this may be the best the basketball program's ever been. You had a guy like this guy, it's the best it's ever been, and it gets better. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is just hard to believe, hard to fathom. The program's actually in that kind of spot, in that stratosphere. But man, it's really, really nice to be here. Thanks for listening to Locked On Coogs today. Locked On Coogs is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. For a second listen of the day, I'm going to recommend Locked On College Basketball. Andy and Isaac do a great job breaking down the whole, all conferences, all high, low, mid-major, all the things. They do a great job there, so go check them out. Locked On Coogs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network is your team every day. Go Coogs.